Christopher, can you hear me okay, brother?
Yes, I can hear you well. How about you?
Good. Yeah, perfect. How are you, man?
Doing really well.
This is a bit of crazy times that we're in.
Yes.
So you're in lockdown at the moment as well?
Yeah, voluntary. We there's not major restrictions here. They've certainly requested it, but things are functioning fairly fully, but we've voluntarily hold up.
Yeah. It's pretty crazy times.
Right?
It's
Never seen anything like this.
yeah, it's hard to know what to make of it all.
Yeah.
Hmm. So, thanks for jumping on the call. Um,
Be here.
it was interesting. Um, I put a just some inquiries out to some friends of mine about who to chat to about men's issues, leadership, marriage, entrepreneurship, and your name kept coming up, and it was about 6 hours after I had a conversation around yourself that I saw someone post in the ClickFunnels Facebook group looking for a high level coach for mindset, for relationships, for business. And it was like 50%, like half of the thread was just people dropping your name. So it was like, okay, all right, I've got to reach out to you and get you on a call. So thank you, man, like for the time that you're taking to have a chat.
I feel honored and humbled. Thank you.
Beautiful. So how did you get into coaching? Like what's your, for the, some of my listeners that maybe don't know your story, how have you gotten into coaching?
I think I'm going to tell this story a little different than I normally do and start a little further back. So I'm kind of smiling because I'm thinking back where it really started. I mean, and of course, our whole lives lead up to everything, but I'm thinking about being a teenager and riding around in the car with my dad, who I have a very strained relationship with, and him listening to, Deepak Chopra and Neil Donald Walsh and uh, who are some of the other people, Course in Miracles and Wayne Dyer and these guys, and me just being like, Dad, turn this shit off. Like, let me listen to some music. This is so boring.
uh,
And then eventually, slowly being like, well, I actually kind of like that. I felt good after listening to that. And then, so in my late teens, I started listening to books and continued that habit all through my 20s. But it wasn't until my mid-20s that I was going through a very painful divorce with my first marriage, and I attended a full immersion 8-day retreat in the mountains. And that was a huge game changer, but I kind of just went back to, okay, that's enough. Like, I'm good. Back to business as usual, which was me building a business. I had 65 employees and millions of dollars of equipment and was just driving to accomplish this, being somebody. And I didn't even realize that the primary motivators behind all that was me feeling like nobody and wanting to prove that I was somebody. So then I dived back into business as usual after some deep transformation, and then that relationship finally fell apart permanently maybe 4 years later when I was 29. And at that time, it got really dark, really heavy, really ugly, and triggered, sorry, twinkling with the thing and dropped it. And right before I kind of put an end to things, I finally I reached out to a coach, and that coach literally every session we would do 10 years worth of work every session. Things that I had struggled my entire life with would be cleared in an hour or two, and it just blew my mind. And it happened
Wow.
over and over. And, over the coming months, started to merge in me just saying, man, you've got to do this. You got to help others. There's so many others struggling with these things. You've got to give these, you can't keep this to yourself. You got to give it away. It took me another solid year to even consider the idea of stepping into that role, because the voices on the backside of that telling me that I wasn't worthy. Who was I? They'll laugh. Who the hell are you? Look where you've come from. Look at your flaws. Like, who are you? It was super intense, but eventually came around, and the voices that were welling up inside saying, you've got to share this, became bigger than the voices saying, you're nobody, you're nothing, shut your mouth. Eventually the other ones won out, and we took it on, and we've been doing, so now I've been coaching for 13 or 14 years now, full force, quit everything else, sold everything off, and took the leap clear back before anyone was taking the leap, or very few, and been in it ever since. So
Beautiful. That part where you mentioned about the drive as an entrepreneur to create, to build something. I mean, that's certainly been a theme in my life, and some of the people I get to work with, it's a recurring theme.
yeah.
How do you go about identifying that? Because it can be so consuming being in business. Being an entrepreneur is a very practical way in some ways of dealing with demons.
Yeah.
But a lot of the time, unconsciously, we're actually feeding them as opposed to truly facing them.
Yeah.
So this dynamic of being an entrepreneur, it seems to bring these dynamics up. How do you catch it when you're caught up in running a business?
So first I want to sidestep with a little separate answer, and then I'll dive into that. But I've said for years, if you want to achieve enlightenment, be a business owner, be married, have kids, and be committed to your fitness and well-being and your spirituality and all that all at once.
Yeah.
That'll put you through grinding that pearl through the sand to become that pearl for sure, if you stick with it.
Yeah, that's the perfect storm.
Perfect storm.
Any one of those
Right.
will bring things to the forefront.
Yeah.
But stack all of those on top of each other. It's a method for insanity, really.
Right.
So how do you
kind of, I think your question was related to how do you catch those underlying patterns so that you're actually clearing out the demons versus feeding the demons. And it's like a catch-22, all right? You wouldn't want to not take the journey, because if you didn't take the journey, then you don't expose the demons, or you don't reach the potential. But if you don't come to recognize the demons and integrate and come into healthy functionality with yourself, then you keep dragging a lot of dead weight and self-sabotaging, doing all these things. So I guess really it's a matter of, we get clarity, we commit, we move forward over and over. The formula I've said for years is the simplest version: get up more times than you fall, learn from every fall. Right? So eventually, as long as, and I'll add to that, I believe the number one thing that determines how fast and easy success comes for us in any area of life is determined by our level of openness to learning. If we are dead set on being right, proving that we're right, justifying, defending, arguing, defending our limitations, Anything that holds us back from the highest possible level of openness to learning determines how many times we have to repeat the same lessons, how hard and loud those lessons have to be, how long and hard the learning process gets to be. So we want it to be fast and easy as possible. It's all about being as confident as possible, at the very same time being as humble or open to learning. Not the old definition of humility that's like, oh, I suck. No, don't give me any compliments. It was nothing. More like, yeah, I am awesome, and I also suck, right? Like, I'm really awesome in these ways, and I suck in these ways. Here it all is. I don't need to pretend that I'm everything. I don't need to pretend that I'm nothing. I'll just embrace all of it right here in front of you and show you all my cards, and we'll take it for what it is. So through that, ultimately, it's going to expose our everything, whether we're in a committed relationship or committed to a business or committed to actually learning from our kids instead of just passing our shit down to them.
Yeah.
Whatever we're committed to, it's going to show us, I mean, even fitness or health or nutritional goals, or when we commit, we're then met with every counter commitment that would keep us from that outcome or objective. And if we learn from those counter commitments, then we move forward in a new way. If we don't, we keep repeating until something else happens.
Yeah. So those counter commitments and the triggers that set those off, there's an expression of resistance.
Yeah.
And the level of resistance that shows up is really those thresholds around, how much love you'll experience, how successful you'll tolerate your business, that connection with your kids. Those thresholds, how do we lean into them? Like, how do we find out where that edge is, and how do we lean into facing those? Because it can be really easy to bump into a threshold and just walk the other way.
Yep. And I would say that's probably the number one key to most people's failure is they commit to big things. They start to move forward in creating. They run into high levels of resistance and get outside their comfort zone. They quit and go the other way. That's probably the number one thing I've observed in the thousands and thousands of clients I've worked with, is the ones who have the grit, the follow through, the commitment, the ability to execute relentlessly while being open to learning. Because I don't want to slip into that slippery slope of hustle and grind. There's so many people that are just pushed. Oh, it's the hustle, it's the grind, it's and those guys are at war all the time. I was at war when I bought into that. But there's this important factor that's this dance of how do I be in balance with the masculine and feminine of receiving and being inspired and taking action from that place, while staying in flow, while putting my oxygen mask on first, taking great and amazing care of myself so that I'm coming from a well-sustained and fortified and supported space, but then being able at the same time to execute over and over and over. Because for me, what happened is I kind of started as this rough farm boy redneck that just powered through, and then I have this massive spiritual awakening and I get all soft and super, super soft and can't execute anything. And then I swing over back to like Warrior's Way, like just hammering down CrossFit and Ironman, and Spartan races and all this stuff, and then come back, and hopefully I'm somewhere here now. As my experience is now I'm more here somewhere where I still have that grit and that follow through that I gained through putting myself through those very intense experiences and pushing those thresholds, whether it be Wim Hof breathing in cold or hot, or doing a full Ironman, or all the other, intense things that I did, what I found is however much I pushed myself outside of my comfort zone became permanently stretched. And then my capacity and then the more often I did that, like when I committed to Ironman, I nowhere near had the capacity of an Ironman. Now, even though it's been several years and I'm still not training to that capacity, I still have a lot of the mental benefits of a knowing of, yeah, when I commit to something, I can make it happen.
Yeah.
Like, there's a confidence that hasn't left, and a knowing and habit systems that know the value of commitment and follow through and what that's done to change my life in every way. So essentially we got to gain that grit while also having that feminine balance with it. And in order to get it, we've got to be willing to step outside that comfort zone, push ourselves in certain ways, and build habit over time. It's kind of like, which wolf will you feed? Will you feed the one that says, oh, I'm too tired and sore and lazy? Or you feed the one that says, yeah, we got this?
Yeah. You've got initiated on your shirt. Is that a program you're running, or can you tell me about that? Because the part of the process that you're describing, doing Ironmans, doing they're initiations in a sense,
right,
that are expanding those thresholds. Can you tell me about that dynamic?
Yeah, so I'm not running this event currently. I've run it multiple times, and I've had a lot of people ask me, please put that on some more. And I'm like, okay, when the time's right. But the way the initiated came about, I used to partner with a guy. We ran a warrior program for men where we would put them through, we'd start off day one and put them through 3 back-to-back CrossFit workouts with no break in between, just 1, 2, 3. And then we would take them, give them a short drive across town, put them on the beach. We'd bring in a top-notch martial arts, jiu-jitsu fighting champion and train them on the beach. So for the next 6 or 8 hours in the sun and sand, we would have them beat each other up. After 3 back-to-back CrossFit workouts, then we'd have them do martial arts training all day in the sun and in the sand. And they would be bloody and sweaty and scratched up and just gritty and just exhausted beyond, like, push them to the point where there was nothing left really to hold together their personas, their egos. And so they were these very A-type, red personality, warrior type, ego, oh man. And we'd take the full first day just to basically get them to a place of, now I'm not a badass. I'm just a guy half beat to death laying there in a place of humility. And then we would dive in and we'd start working with them the next day on nutrition and spirituality and meditation and relationships and balance and all of that. And then we'd spend the next day diving into business and the financial end and fitness and these types of things. And it was very effective. So then I ended up parting ways with that guy. We had some differences in opinion and approaches that eventually led to us saying, cool, we need to do our own things. And so then I just went on coaching one-on-one. I'm doing some live events and different things. But then I took on Ironman. So I had done CrossFit, then I had done Spartan races, and I decided, you know what? It's time for me to go next level. I'm going to do an Ironman. So I committed to full Ironman. I had bad knees, bad hips, no gear. I was riding my wife's 16-year-old mountain bike. I had no, massive swim trauma that I didn't even know about.
Oh boy.
No experience cycling. It was rough. So I went through, hired multiple coaches and overcame the swim trauma and learned how to swim really well and hired an Ironman coach and did lots of practicing and running and cycling and all this stuff. Well, in the midst of all that, my wife came down really heavy with Lyme disease. And so what ended up coming of it was my days looked like my wife in bed on her deathbed, me being her nurse. I learned over a FaceTime call how to administer IVs and do things that
Wow.
typically you wouldn't know how to do. So I would get up and nurse her, get the kids up and ready and off to school, make breakfast for everybody. I was essentially the mom, the dad, the nurse, and I was running 3 businesses at the time. And I was training for Ironman, which took me anywhere between 3 to 9 hours a day of training. And so what I noticed, so one day I was riding, and it was probably the sun came up. I went out training at 1 a.m. because I'd have to get up that early to get that in and still pull everything off. And so it's like 8 o'clock in the morning or something. I've been riding for 7 hours, and I'm feeling like $1,000,000. And I think this is a miracle. Like, I was the guy who couldn't complete anything. Literally, I couldn't even commit to anything, let alone actually do it. And here I am getting up at 1 a.m. I've already been working out for 7 hours, and I feel like $1,000,000. Like, this is a miracle. And I thought, you know what? You know how many men need this? You know how many clients I've worked with that have all these dreams and goals and aspirations and big desires to fuel change or make a difference or change their life, and the biggest thing is they don't know how to commit and follow through. And look what Ironman's given me, and look at all these things that I've done that have brought me to this point that I could get up at 1 o'clock in the morning, work out for 7 hours, and feel on top of the world, and I haven't even started my day yet.
Yeah.
And so then I still had a couple hours left of training that morning. And so I'm making mental notes as I'm writing. I'm going, what all got me here? And I'm thinking, yeah, I did a 65-day juice fast, and I breathed face down with a snorkel in the type of hot tub that's so hot you can't sit in it for 15 minutes without having to get out because you feel like you're going to die. And I breathed face down with a snorkel until I was able to calm my mind and stay and not have my body freak out. And then I did the same thing in hypothermic conditions, and I did all this breath work, and I did 2 10-day silent Vipassana meditation retreats, and I had taken survival training and multiple times courses out in the wild on surviving off of, just as long as you got a knife. And so I was thinking through what all gave me this level of grit and follow through and commitment. And I made a mental note of all this intense, crazy, extreme stuff that I had committed to that was very hard that I had overcome and accomplished. I was like, you know what? I'm going to create an event and an experience where, and that one I had that warrior type program that I told you about was a 3-day deal, right? It's like physically beat them up, and then, teach them all these deeper principles, and then turn them around and show them how to make money with their passion and purpose. 3-day deal. Well, I designed this on this day, and while I was cycling, I'm like, I need a week. I've got to have an entire week because I need to put these guys through a version of every initiation I've gone through. And so then I end up going home and I start researching everything I can find on initiations in indigenous tribes and cultures, things with the devil, the different devils and bullet ants and combo and Sanenga and all these interesting things. And so I combine all this. I end up putting a whole bunch of that together into a 7-day experience where day one I had these guys show up, and I didn't tell them anything about the event other than you better show up in good shape or else you're going to hurt yourself. And day one I said, well, saddle up, we're doing a half Ironman. And so these guys, who none of them being triathletes, all did a half Ironman on the spot, impromptu, and then went on to do all these other, took them out in the wild and did survival things and put them in ice cold water and took them to hot springs and had them breathe through the intensity of that, and gave him no food or water for days on end. Just said, here's a knife, and when you figure out how to get water and food, you got water and food. Until then, we're out here together. We better work together as a team. Let's go.
Wow.
That's a little bit of some of the things
Well,
that's about.
that's an initiation for sure. Why do you think entrepreneurs need that type of training, like the initiation process, forging their mindset, their physicality, their spirituality, their purpose to a new level? I'm kind of answering part of the question, but
Yeah.
what, why, why do we need to do this? Like we're 2020 at the time of this interview. We're in a modern era, supposedly. What's the role of this for men? And because I believe it's truly needed, this type of interaction. Why this type, and why for entrepreneurs?
It's so loaded.
It's a totally loaded question.
Yeah. As a society, we're disconnected from nature. We're disconnected from the food chain. We're disconnected from our roots. We're disconnected from the indigenous wisdom. We're disconnected from heart and soul and spirit. We're disconnected from purpose. We're disconnected from ourselves. And we're conditioned. We're addicted to technology. We're addicted to dopamine from every time we check our social media. We're addicted to sourcing our everything outside of ourselves. So it's like, I'm good if my bank account's good. If I got a hot woman on my side and fast car in the driveway and fat bank account and everyone thinks I'm a badass, then I'm good. And, essentially, if my confidence isn't such, and the truth is my confidence isn't such to date. I've practiced a lot, and I think I can achieve it, and I continue to move that direction constantly. But for me, true confidence would be, you could call me anything, do anything, say anything, and I'm able to stay in a place of self-love and a place of power and integrity and know the truth of who I am, and that I could lose anything and everything outside of me. And that my confidence is based on what's in me, not anything outside of me, because anything outside of me is a sandy foundation. So if it's based on my material possessions, if it's based on my relationships, even if it's based on my kids, which is a deep one, right? So we tend to really attach our identity to our status, our social status, people's acceptance or approval, our bank account, our material possessions, our primary relationship, our kids and their well-being. But at the end of the day, my belief and experience is that when I have the ultimate choice and freedom and peace, which essentially means heaven on earth to me, is that I could be starving to death under a bridge, having lost everybody and everything, or down by the river, or whatever the scenario is, or in the desert or whatever, and that I could be okay with what is and be okay with who I am and where I am, that I've lived in such a state of self-love and integrity and learned to source my own well-being within in such a way that I can go, oh, this is happening. And I can breathe. And if all I had was my breath, or if even that, oh, my breath's gone too, or it's going. Okay, what's next, right? So, because if you get down to what do we actually need, it depends on what to live. Obviously, we need food, air, water to some degree, depending on if you're talking to a breatharian or or someone else, but who says we have to live. So essentially, we don't need anything, depending on what dimension you're speaking from. But But to come to a place of my well-being happens within me, and I have a choice about that, and it's a response, not a reaction. And I choose every day to learn from everything that happens and utilize every opportunity and experience to fuel and continue my self-love journey to a point that there's nothing, I'm in a place of peace, which to relate that to like this current Corona thing, nothing's changed for me. I still do what I do. None of my business has changed whatsoever. The only thing that's changed is I have more quality time with my family and myself. I'm not saying that don't mean that things won't still change in the future. But what's true in all that is, although I'm deeply intuitive and deeply connected with everything that's happening for everybody, and I have strong empathy for others, I'm not in a place of chaos or stress whatsoever. I've spent so many years surrendering outcomes and accepting outcomes and loving myself and sourcing my own well-being that I'm able to be a place of calm and peace for others versus being a part of the chaos.
Yeah, that's powerful.
Yeah.
When you experience these moments where you settle into that self-knowing and absolute acceptance of what is, when you first experience it, this is me speaking from my personal experience, initially it can cause you to let go of desire.
Yeah.
And the things that I've been raised to believe in as being important seem to fall away.
Yeah.
You're certainly not focusing on them.
Yeah.
Now being an entrepreneur, and the listeners that will most likely be aligned with this interview and will be receiving this, I believe there's a good chance that they are here for a reason.
Yeah.
They're here on earth for a reason.
Yep.
When you reach this place of being able to accept what is, in my experience, after a period of time, what starts to come through the opening of your heart and the awareness is a sense of purpose.
Yeah.
That is different.
Yep.
Can you lean into that and your experience of that from that perspective of being okay with what is?
Yeah. So if we looked at the first, business I was doing, my drivers and focus was I'm going to have the fast car, the toys, the RV, the ATVs, all the cool stuff that cool people have. I'm going to have all this money and the nicest everything. And man, it's going to be awesome because I'll be able to prove. And I didn't realize at the beginning, it was more just like, I want all this stuff. I want this cool stuff because that looks cool.
Yeah.
Upon later reflection and deeper learning and growth, I was like, holy shit, I was doing all that to compensate for feeling inadequate and fundamentally flawed and wanting to prove that I was somebody. And then you come to this stage you're describing where you do more deeper work and you surrender some things and you shift course and whatever happens and you become okay with what is. And then it's like, well, there's nothing to do then. Like, this is all an illusion. So now what? If none of this is real and it's not serious and I don't need to prove anything to anybody, including myself, then now what?
Now what?
And then you fall into, and there's this interesting correlation here too that I don't remember speaking to before, but I keep feeling inclined to speak to it right now, that I notice in when people do reach a certain level of financial success, this also innately comes up. In the beginning, it's survival of me and mine. I'm going to get mine, right, is the kind of energy.
Yeah.
And then when those people reach a certain level, then they start to go, well, I've done everything, I've had everything, I've got all this money, now what? And a lot of them tend to go, well, what can I get back? And then some of them don't. Some of them just never ending, like greed to the forever, right? But there comes a point, and then we switch over to this thing that we're talking about right now that's similar. It's like somewhere along the line, whether you did medicine or breath work or whatever you did, and went through a deep traumatic thing and got coaching or attended a seminar or retreat or whatever it was, and boom, you were given that red pill experience. Then it's like, well, who am I now, and why am I here, and what am I here for? And essentially, there's a couple versions that I've read about that that kind of help define it. Well, Gay Hendricks said his purpose is something like, my purpose is to continuously expand in joy, love, and prosperity, and to help as many others as possible to do the same. Some version of that. Then in one of my all-time favorite books called Love Without Conditions by Paul Ferrini, he says, your purpose in life is to answer the call for love wherever you hear it.
Ooh.
And I love that one because there's so many calls for love out there.
Yeah.
And so that one's deep and fascinating. And then one of my other all-time favorites was in one of the Conversations with God books. It seems like it might have been In Communion with God was the name of the book, if I remember right, or might have been another one. But he said, and I hopefully am quoting this accurately, it's pretty close. Your purpose in life is to recreate yourself anew into the next grandest version of the greatest vision you've ever held about who you are. Right? But if I look at all three of these versions I've given, they're saying the same thing in a different way. If I recreate myself into the next greatest version of myself, and I'm answering the call for love wherever I hear it, and I'm essentially constantly making myself and my life better, and then helping as many others as possible to do the same. Now, instead of like, oh, I'm getting this false sense of security and fulfillment by all this stuff out here that can be taken away. And really what helped me was to lose that shit, to build it, lose it, build it, lose it. And in the loss was the self-reflection and coming to those deeper places. So really, all of it's a blessing. The divorce and the bankruptcy and the losses and the wins and all of it, it's all just learning opportunities and all just feedback. And so, but to reach that place of now coming from, well, who am I now and now what, and what does it even matter, to, well, what matters essentially comes as something of what contribution can I make? What legacy can I leave that isn't just, oh, look at all this money I left for my kids. It's what positive difference did I make in, you know, and for me, it tied in spiritually too, starting with a religious background. I went through a stage of questioning everything. Is atheism true? Is there no God? Is Christianity and the fundamentalist religious belief system true? Or is this Eastern philosophy of reincarnation true? And what I came to after much reflection was, I don't know. It doesn't matter. The answer is the same regardless.
Yeah.
My answer was, if it's atheist and there's no God, I'm just going to be energy that absorbs back into the ocean and no one will give a shit that I existed, nor will I know. Then the answer is like, well, how good can I make this life while I've got it? If Christianity was true and you got one shot to get it right, and that's going to determine all of eternity, and you're going to be sent to hell or heaven and to whatever degree, and you better get this shit right. You got one shot. You better you better give it all you got.
Yeah.
Do all the good that you can. Become all the good that you can, and just come in sliding in sideways, having ridden full out. Or if reincarnation's true, we got to come back and clean up karma over and over and over until we finally achieve enlightenment or some version of that. It's like, I don't want to cycle back and go through this shit in umpteen more times. So If that's the case, the same answer, recreate myself anew over and over again into the next grandest version of the greatest vision I've ever held about who I could be, and then turn and give that gift back to anyone and everyone who's willing and ready.
Beautiful.
And in that, I've said I get paid multiple times because when there's an amazing book that talks about raising your upper limits and your capacity for joy and goodness. Gay Hendricks, The Big Leap. Just phenomenal mindset around viewing, raising our thermostat of how good we can stand life. But I've said that, and he talks about the zone of genius in that, and it's like, not that, oh, I'm a genius like Einstein or somebody, more like, no, why am I here? What do I most love to do? What would I do whether I got paid or not? What do I do that I lose track of time when I'm doing it, that I could do all day and never get sick of it, that I would never want to retire from it? And so when we get people aligned with like a deeper sense of spiritual meaning and purpose, and that's like beyond just physical, right? So we got the mental, emotional, spiritual, physical, social, financial, all these dynamics. When we can find that why that is so deep and inherent that it's unshakable, and we're doing what we love, and we know that we absolutely make a positive difference, and it's so deeply fulfilling beyond any amount of money that or material things could ever fill or buy. But you still get those things. And in fact, you make more money doing those things because you're providing the deepest possible amount of value that you could ever provide. It's not just surface level trinket shit. It's true, deep meaning and purpose. And then for me, it didn't, at first I thought, well, I need to write off money. Like that shit's part of the evil. It's part of the system, blah, 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 blah. And eventually come back to no, all the difference that I want to make. I have all these broke hippie healer friends that have this big heart and passion and deep capacity for understanding and see the problems and the solutions, and they're doing nothing about it, and they feel just torn inside because they want to do something but they don't know how. Maybe they don't have the grit, maybe they don't have the financial wherewithal, maybe they don't know how to own their voice, maybe they judge people that have stepped into their power, or whatever the levels are that keep them with this passion to do something but doing nothing.
Yeah.
And then how do we get through all of that to do something with it? And so for me, it became, I'm going to, not only I'm going to get back in the money game, I'm going to kick ass at it. I'm going to make more money than I've ever made in a state of balance, adding true value to only people and things that make the world a better place, align with my values and integrity, and I'm going to utilize this money for good.
That's powerful. And getting to that place and that space, an initiation process can help you find that.
Yes. And I mean, even if you didn't, attend an event, if an actionable thing would be, if I were to challenge somebody on that, it'd be every single day, document what challenge are you going to take today? How are you going to step out of your comfort zone today? And write it down. Write it down that you're going to do it. Write it down that, check it off when you've done it. And if that means posting vulnerably on a social media site, cool. If that means jumping off a cliff into a river safely, cool. If that means going on a longer run than you think you can handle, or, camping out overnight in the dark, or whatever it is, spending more alone time than you're typically accustomed to handling. What are all the ways you can find to stretch your comfort zone? And if you just did one stretch a day, every day for the rest of your life, you'll be so much better for it.
Awesome. Now, in terms of the expansion dynamic, I'm just circling back a little bit because we've already covered a lot. How relationships act as a mirror, often for the things that we maybe don't want to see about ourselves. How do you see this balance of masculinity and femininity and the light and dark, and your partner being that ultimate mirror for you. Can you maybe share some of your experience with that dynamic specifically? And I'll point this in a loaded direction for maybe those men and women, if they end up watching this too, but are in a situation where they maybe have become roommates with their spouse, and that, maybe that raw attractions faded. Maybe they still love each other, but the polarity's gone, and it might be easier to go to work and focus on the business and tackle those challenges than to come back and feel that ache and longing for connection that you can feel slowly disappearing. Can you maybe dive into that one?
Yes, another loaded one. So let's start with a foundation of a couple of concepts and principles here. So it's been said that you could walk into a room of thousands of people, and that the person that you would be most attracted to would be the person who has the greatest capacity to trigger your unloved places, which is a frequency thing on what are their unresolved issues, what are their unloved places, and what are yours. And so on an unconscious level, there's this frequency that's this magnetic draw that's less about, oh, she's sexy. That's obviously part of it, but there's a deeper thing underneath that's energetically saying, oh, she'll trigger the shit out of you. And that there's this draw to that, because ultimately our higher self cares more about our deepest healing and expansion and remembrance of the truth of who we are than it does about how sexy of a mate that we attract. And this is true in hetero relationships or non-hetero, all types of relationships. There's still a masculine-feminine dynamic. And within ourselves, there's a masculine-feminine dynamic. And I find it most helpful, and my belief around this is that all of us get to come to a place of being completely at peace with both the full range of our masculine and feminine traits. That being only okay with masculine and having shut a lot of that down, maybe, think about elementary school. In kindergarten, I probably could have skipped up like this, dancing and singing, and I would have just been a normal kid having a good time. And in first grade or whenever it is, and I do that, and I get called a queer or a fag or a pussy or whatever the mean thing that, is that thing, and I start to stifle my expression, my joy, my creativity, my fun, my playfulness, my exuberance. And then I start to think, oh, it must be bad to be gay or this or that or the other, right? So I start to shut down my full expression, and then maybe more and more through middle school and high school, it's, the more intense and ego, machimo, masculine I get into, the more, reward I get. And it's fascinating how typically in those settings, it's the guy that's mean to women gets the most women. And then that's confusing to the nice guys, because they're like, well, I'm really nice. But they go these jerks. And so there's this fascinating dynamic of another deeper layer of a primal response is, will my offspring in the female, will my offspring, even if they don't plan to have offspring, will my offspring survive with this mate? Will they genetically be strong enough? Will they mentally, emotionally be strong enough to survive? Will this mate be able to provide for me and protect me? And so there's these more innate things. So then we get in relationship, and so now I'll speak to personal experience straight up. My relationship went through a phase when I described I went from, farm boy to spiritual softy. my relationship flattened out. We became roommates, and the sex went away, and the sexual attraction went away, and it was very troubling. And so that's before I went and started doing all this Ironman and Spartan and these different things. Because at the same time, not only did the sexual attraction leave, my ability to make money left.
Yep.
Right. And so I was actually, so I'll back up even further. It came to a point where my wife basically said, I'm not attracted anymore, and I'm sick and tired of being hungry. We weren't really hungry, but like not thriving financially. We need some space. And I was like, well, fine, but you also need to source your own well-being and quit blaming me for shit and like step up as an equal. And so we took this 6 months where we moved out into separate places, and so I'm like kind of fasting and praying and doing deep soul searching. I'm asking, man, what do I do to provide the way I want to provide as a husband and father? And I finally, after an extended period of time, received a very clear message. It said, handle your fitness and your finances will work themselves out. The way you do one thing is the way you do all things. And so handle this and you'll see. So I started CrossFit, which was a miracle because I hadn't been able to commit to anything and stick with it. But I burned the ships this time. I got a workout buddy. I said, no ifs, ands, or buts, 5 days a week. We're both holding each other to it. No excuses. There's no amount of soreness, tiredness, or sickness that can stop us. We're holding it to, period, the end, 5 days a week. That's it. No questions asked. And then I went on social media, and I'd been in business for years and years doing coaching via social media. And I posted publicly, I said, look, I've committed to 5 days a week of CrossFit. If I don't do this and you're a current client, fire me. Because if I can't follow through on what I commit to, who the hell am I to help you with anything? And if you've been considering hiring me and I don't follow through on this, don't hire me, because how the hell am I supposed to help you if I can't follow through on what I say I'm going to do? And so I just flat out burned the ships, and that's when I finally started to conquer this pattern of things. And so then it wasn't too far into CrossFit that it was a 10-round workout, and I'd gone 3 rounds, and my body and mind was saying, you are beyond done. There's nothing left. Stop. The end. It's over. 3 rounds out of 10. And I was like, well, I can take one more step. I still got one more step. Yeah, I've still got one more step. And I finished the 10 rounds. And then I laid down on the floor and I just started bawling. And I had this huge download and breakthrough. And the other people were looking at me like, what the hell is this new guy laying on the floor crying about? And I'm having the breakthrough of my life going, holy shit, it's 100% right. Handle my fitness and everything else will work itself out. And that's when I got the major download. Is like, yeah, dude, you commit to things. You get to a level 3 and you say, it's too much. I can't take it. But you've had the capacity to go all 10 rounds the entire time.
Yeah.
You've just exercised the weak part, the voice that says quit. You've just said yes to the voice that said quit over and over and over and strengthened the quit muscle, not the finish muscle. And so that changed everything. And so really that's how I woke up the masculine and restored it. Was I really put a focus on, okay, what would a masculine guy, and the thing is you never lose aspects of self. I never lost the soft guy. I never lost the spiritual guy. I never lost the caring, loving guy. If you got it, you got it. I never lost the integrity, but I was able to strengthen the masculine without becoming too intense of an ego masculine, which I was shown later in a medicine journey, like how much ego I still had surfacing in there. But I very strategically, I would be like, hey, what music would kind of represent that intense masculine? And I would listen to that type of music, and I would work out intense, and I would push myself hard, and I I would say, okay, what would a man, because then I started to explore sovereignty beyond just the macho man. Like, what does sovereignty look like? And it's like, it's not about domineering, it's not about controlling, but it's about confidence, it's about gentleness, it's about strength, all at once. And so in that, it was like a man in his sovereignty, or a person in their sovereignty, would know themselves, know their purpose, be on purpose, speak with power but not force, be with power but not force, and have the ability to execute, follow through, be their word, be in integrity, while being all the other things too, soft and gentle and loving and kind and caring and present and emotionally intelligent and empathetic and right, all these other things. But back to the masculine feminine thing in the relationship, to bring all this back together, it was very powerful to intentionally go, okay, how do I strengthen my masculine? How do I reintegrate that part? Which also included integrating the dark side and coming to accept, embrace different parts that I had judged and isolated and tried to get rid of. So that was key. And then ultimately back to the mirror thing is, every time I'm judging there, I can say, she don't listen, just like me. So the best sentence and the best completion to a sentence ever is just like me. So
Yep.
anything I could say about anyone out there, they're a bunch of freaks, just like me. She's insensitive, just like me.
You see your shadow.
Yeah. And so to play with all of that, to dance with the masculine and feminine, to continually expand the capacity to be and dance and flow and in all of the different hard and soft aspects of what it means to be a human, to embrace the dark side, and to use every trigger in a relationship as simply a sign of what's calling to be loved next.
Ooh.
Like that brings back everything we said about purpose. Your purpose in life is to expand into the next greatest version of the grandest vision you've ever held about who you are. We got the chance in relationship and parenting and business all day long to go, where is it that I'm triggered? Where is it that I'm thrown off kilter? And what is calling to be loved beneath that? And so I don't have to wait for a retreat. I don't have to wait for a breakthrough. I don't have to wait for anything. It's just every time I'm thrown off kilter or center in any way, oh, that's the next thing here arising to be loved. And I'm that much further into the remembrance of the truth of who I am.
That's beautiful. That's powerful. There's a lot in that. There's a lot. You've brought so much of that together. In terms of embracing your dark side, do you have a recommendation or a process that you could maybe simply describe? Because again, that's one of the things that I see is a problem for accepting our wants and our needs in a relationship. How do you go about acknowledging that side of it?
Yeah.
Your darkness.
So a great book recommendation would be The Dark Side of the Light Chasers. That's a great starting point. But something actionable, I would recommend writing down a list, taking plenty of time, breathing, meditating, really, going within, because they'll get out of it. Anyone will get out of this what they put into it. What are all the things that you find hard to accept about yourself and or others? Or, what primary judgments do you see yourself thinking about your ideal, your partner or anyone else? And if you listed out all those judgments and then start to be with that statement, just like me, but in a way, not like, because here's the thing is guilt and shame undermines confidence, lowers our frequency. It's a very negative impact. And so it's not like just like me, right? It's Yeah, I
You have to,
maybe ought to soften my judgment about that asshole over there because I'm one too,
yeah,
right? And that's okay. And I love myself. Hey, yeah, you're an ass sometimes, and that's okay. I love you. Let's not use this as a justification and reason to operate in a way that's suboptimal and ineffective and doesn't work. But let's do be loving and understanding, and let's get curious about what we can learn from this at the same time. So it's very key that so I say the two pillars of success in everything in life is unconditional love and impeccable integrity. And the unconditional love would say, hey, I love you, especially when you're an asshole. That's when you need to be loved more, not less. But not in a way that says, yeah, that's fine. Just show up in a way that don't work or get the results you want or support other success or just do your thing. No, no, no. We're not using it as an excuse. Unconditional love says, I love you no matter what. Impeccable integrity says, yes, and we're going to learn from this. Right? Or if we maybe made that a mom and dad scenario, it'd be, Mom, come here. It's okay. And Dad's like, yeah, but what are you going to learn from this?
yeah,
Right? So if we can just look at, and so a simple way would be make that list. What all do we judge in ourselves and others, and how can we get in right relationship with all those aspects and soften our judgment and anything we're trying to get rid of, including ego. It's so common out there, like, oh, I'm going to get rid of that ego. And even that's an ego trip, right?
yeah.
because that analogy is really drives it home. Like when I lock away, one of those aspects might be ego. One of those aspects might be other parts of ego. You might not be okay being seen sad, which emotions are simply emotions, right? Or anger or fear. As men, we've been judged that if you're scared, you're weak, and if you're sad, you're weak, and if you're angry, you're mean, and if you're sexual, you're a pervert, and if you're too happy, you're gay in a negative sense, a perceived negative sense, right? So it's like, and those are the 5 core feelings of what it means to be alive and experience the spice of life, and let alone all these other character traits that include just a vast array of things. And so I would certainly make a list of all the things I judge in myself and others and be with those in a way to just come to peace and terms with, yep, these are all aspects of myself and that's okay. And then the second thing would just be every time you're triggered, make a commitment now to view feedback as the breakfast of champions and to view everything that happens in your life as feedback. Everything. If your car breaks down, it's feedback. If your computer and technology is struggling, it's feedback. If you're sick, it's feedback. If you're burned out, it's feedback. If you have body parts, a crushed disc in your back, that's feedback. If your relationship's struggling, that's feedback. It's all feedback. It's all showing you what's aligned and not aligned. And if you'll receive it, you can adjust. And if you don't, you keep beating your head against the wall, feeling like a victim and wondering why this always happens to you.
That's powerful. That's a lifetime of work. Because there's always another layer. Maybe there's not. Maybe there's not. But
so far, there's always been another layer. Yeah. We can say that.
Yep. There's new level, new devil type of dynamic. Well, you've been very generous with your time, and our listeners are definitely going to get a lot out of your wisdom and everything that you've shared with us today. If someone were to want to reach out to you and do some work with you or apply to do one of your programs, what is the best way for them to get connected with you?
Thank you for that. It's been an absolute joy to be here with you today. I certainly got pretty wordy, and I hope that everyone finds it valuable. It's been a wonderful ride, and I'm grateful for all that I've been able to learn and experience through it. And I love sharing it with others, and it's been a joy connecting with you. As far as reaching me, Facebook is typically the best. And they can check out my website, ascendyourlimits.com. Be probably the second best resource, but Facebook is a great place too. I've got a couple of groups on there. There's one called Ignite Intimacy that's all about relationships. I've got another one called Prosperity Playground that is about all things prosperity in all areas of life, not just finances. And then, if someone really wants to connect deeper, a message on Facebook or, there's a form they can fill out on my website, or they could even email me at christopher@christopherjstubbs.com.
Beautiful. I'll make sure those are in links that can be clickable so our listeners can get in contact with you. Beautiful. Wow. Thank you. Man, that was awesome. A lot of stuff. I feel like I could talk to you for like hours and hours and hours and hours. I'm sure you get that all the time. But yeah, man, like thanks for taking the time to connect and yeah, I really appreciate it.
You're a joy, Jeremy. It's been a joy for me. Thank you.
Awesome. All right. Take care. We'll talk soon.